Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us today for David Rodriguez's gardening Q&A. If you can see on the slide there, if you could please put your question in the chat, give us your name, give us the city that you live in, and give us one gardening or landscape question. And then as the questions are loaded in the chat, I can read them aloud to Mr. David Rodriguez, and then he can answer your questions for you. Again, thank you for joining us today. And David, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Ruby. Ruby Zavala is our Youth Gardens Coordinator with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. She does a wonderful job overseeing the school gardens program and helping educate adults to help youth in the gardening experience. So thank you for helping out today as the moderator, and Molly Keck and Denise as well. So thank you, guys. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is an opportunity for you guys to chat in any gardening or landscape questions that you have, maybe problems you've had with plants in the past, or, fall is just around the corner and maybe you're planning to do some planting this fall or something different. So this opportunity we'll all learn together. And then there's me, David Rodriguez. If you haven't seen my ugly mug there, that's my face there at the Children's Vegetable Garden Program at the Botanical Garden. And we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, our first question comes from Sarah from Arlington, Texas. She asks, my zucchini planted April 16th has two very tiny squash on it. They did not grow, but they did not die. I do water daily. If you can maybe discuss the issue with the small zucchini.
Okay. So all your cucurbit-like crops, including squash, zucchini, cucumbers, and melons, in and around the San Antonio area, and I know we're getting a lot of questions from throughout the state. We usually direct seed early to mid-April, or you can set out transplants. And the key on transplants are very, very young, well-rooted, healthy-looking transplants on the second or third leaf stage. If we plant transplants of these cucurbit-like crops that are real big or overgrown, they seem to be stunted. Now, on these types of cucurbit crops, the male flowers open up first thing in the morning, which has the pollen, and bees have to move that pollen or pollinators from that male flower over to the female flower. And the female flower basically has a small fruit attachment on the back. And that bee typically has to move that pollen 7 times or so in order to get proper pollination. So it could be an overgrown transplant, possibly that you planted, which became a stress to begin with, or it could be variety, or most likely not ample pollination. So if these plants have not performed well this late in the game, and they really haven't done much, it's probably best to go ahead and set out a very young, healthy transplants, or start direct seeding for the month of August, no later than about mid-September.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Ryan from San Antonio. We have a mature grapefruit tree that squirrels seem to be stripping bark from. What can we do about this? Thank you.
Yeah, when we're in these gardening situations, particularly in these urban areas throughout the state, and particularly San Antonio area, We have a lot of issues with city critters. You know, these creatures are hungry. Often we spoil them as we feed deer and other animals. So squirrels and deer and possums and raccoons and the list goes on and on. Mockingbirds and whatever we like, they tend to go after. So squirrels, when they start going for the wood portion of the trunk or limbs, typically it's young squirrels, and either it's a nutritional thing, possibly, or they're teething, or the adults are looking for bedding material for their nest. So it could be an array of any of those possibilities. So I always challenge people, most of us have dogs, and the genetics and the heritage of a dog comes from wolves. And, dogs have often become lazy, they've gotten overweight, they're used to this air condition. So maybe we need to start getting them to do their job and keep these critters in and out of our landscapes. That's one option. The other option is putting netting, deer netting or bird netting. Sometimes we'll keep them from getting there, but it's so hard to put on there. But I really think possibly the thing is to have a heart trap and bait these traps, catch them, and go from there. And in a good season, I think my best season a few years back was 26 squirrels. 26 squirrels in one year. And via West Virginia University, the land grant there, there's other ways to deal with once you catch them.
Okay, thank you, David. The next question comes from Kathleen from Weatherford. She says, hard soil solutions in raised beds. I have mulched and have a lot of clay in our soil.
Yes. Be it bad soil, poor soil, lack of soil, clay soils, sandy soils, or trashy soils. The three key words is organic material, and organic material. Good grade finished manure-based compost is the key here. Working that in every major planting season, particularly vegetable gardening, with the heat that we have throughout the year, and many parts have extreme night and daytime temperatures, that organic material breaks down. So we need to replenish every planting season. Of course, compost needs to be high grade finished, well blended, well balanced, preferably a manure base that's properly aged and decomposed. Remember, compost, we work into the soil profile. Mulch, we keep on the top. We never work in mulch into the soil profile. So, as a rule of thumb for major planting, both in the spring and fall planting of our vegetable gardens, try to work in a minimum of 2 inches of high grade compost, ideally 6 inches into the soil, and then also work your pre-plant granulated fertilizer in with this mix. Till it in, work it in the best you can, and use 3 to 5 pounds of pre-plant granulated fertilizer per 100 square feet, such as a premium 1959 fertilizer.
Okay, the next question comes from Nadia from San Antonio. I want to grow ground cherries and Cape gooseberries. Where is the best place for these, in ground or container or full sun? Thanks.
Okay, those are going to be a challenge here in this area because the availability is going to be very hard to find. And often those are plants that are more adapted to cooler climates, particularly the nighttime temperatures that we have. So Gooseberries are predominantly northern part of the country or eastern coast. Ground cherries as well. So you might, I don't really like to do this because I really like to support our local independent nurseries. You know, one of the best independent nurseries we have locally in San Antonio that's been doing this 80 years is Fanix Garden Centers, 4 generations, and been great partners of the extension service over that time frame. Without a doubt, they carry the best of the best selection of fruit and vegetables. So I might contact them. So when they're bringing all their loads of fruit trees in, maybe one of their vendors might be able to source these two, but they're going to be a very, very specialized crop. So I think growing them in containers and seeing how they would produce here. Otherwise, you might check in uh, the like mail order possibly. I don't like to do that because often you don't know what you're getting on that. So that might be another option as well.
Okay, the next question comes from Kathleen from Weatherford. Hornworms on roots of squash plants. Someone said if I start for fall, I won't have them as we do in summer. Is that true?
Okay, hornworms on roots.
Of squash plants.
Yeah, see, I don't understand the question because typically you have a caterpillar, which they folks call a hornworm, and that usually eats the leaves of the plant. But she's talking about roots on squash plants, so I don't know if she's talking about squash vine borer or not. So we'll cover a little bit of everything. So caterpillars like tomato hornworms that are eating foliage of your plants, and they can devastate them quick. You can spray biological, organically approved insecticides such as liquid BT, fresh liquid BT early in the morning, or liquid spinosad, excuse me, late in the afternoon. Make sure it's fresh. That will take care of caterpillars. If it is particularly like tomato hornworm or something like that. If she's talking about squash vine borer, the female that lays her eggs on the developing squash plants are cucurbit like plants typically when the plants are just growing typically on the stem. They're brown, orange, reddish in appearance. So sometimes when you look at your plants in the morning, you can flick those off with a pocket knife or immediately start inoculating these plants with BT and the spinosad types of products. The product that we wrap tomato plants in early spring planting to get the jump on the neighborhood for plants. You know, we use they insulate the grow web, the white cover. You can possibly look at that as an insect bearer as well. And when the plants are just forming the male and female flowers, then you would need to take that off. And that way the bees can pollinate them, the honeybees and other pollinators. Commercially for squash vine borers, we normally, excuse me, normally don't see this as an issue. And we're trained to plant quality plants in space, space, space. So another option is to plant a little bit thicker than normal. And often when there's a lot of extra plants growing, often the female might be confused because it's not easy access to that particular plant. Once the leaves start hitting each other, so you have ample air circulation and minimize disease pressure, then you would go ahead and go in there and thin those extra plants out. So I don't know what she was asking on that question, but I covered a few topics there.
Uh, yes, David, she was talking about the squash vine borers.
Okay,
In the
thank you.
chat, she put that, she meant the squash vine borers.
Okay.
Okay, the next question comes from Rebecca from San Antonio. I missed David's overview of the fall garden planting from a previous webinar. Would he discuss what makes a successful fall garden? Just real quick, Rebecca, we also have the recorded session on our YouTube channel, My Extension 210.
And we'll show a slide at that towards the end, which is good that we're taping and archiving those as well. So you're here in San Antonio. So and we'll show a slide also towards the end. When you go to the Bexar County Extension Service website, under horticulture, you'll have the spring and fall vegetable recommendation list. Use that as a guideline. It gives you varieties that have proven the test of time. Most of the transplants are available at local independent nurseries and then start out with quality seed. So it gives you varieties, and you can also find information on varieties for the folks throughout the state on the vegetable section, both on Aggie Horticulture website as well as plantanswers.com. So the key is sunlight, full sun, good air circulation, proper spacing, excellent weed management, good nutrition, and always a little bit of good luck. And we cover all that on the My Extension 210 YouTube channel of getting ready for fall planting in your vegetable garden.
Okay, the next question comes from Larry from Houston about baby Bubba Okra in 22-gallon pot. The leaves are falling off. Slimy at attachment to stem. He fertilized with microlife 624 and Osmocote, drip irrigation and mulched below.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this baby Bubba. I think they've grown it over here at our culinary garden at the Botanical Garden. I really prefer Oscar. I think Oscar, without a doubt, is the best semi-dwarf selection. It's also what we call a smooth potted ladyfinger type. And we've been very, very happy with Oscar. Growing okra in containers is a challenge because uh, okra is considered a warm weather crop. So it loves the heat of summer. And growing it in a container, often what happens is we overwater it or we possibly let it dry down too much. So it's really possibly best to grow it in the ground compared to a container. So that could be an issue because the potting soils and the compost that we use in these blended potting mixes, potting medias, often hold too much water, which okra does not like. Like any other crop, organic's fine, but make sure that we lace it with copious amounts with these containers that we're growing, and also use a water soluble supplement as well on a weekly basis. Look real close for aphids as well, or any other insects, and because that could be the residual, the sticky substance of the feeding of the insect. So any of those could be possibilities. So look at that real close. Your okra, I like to tell folks around, and probably next week is to gut them, cut the centers out of them about 1/3 or so, kick up that fertilizer on them. That will really help flush them out going into the fall time. Because if you time it right and prune and fertilize and get it all where you need to be, all things being equal, you can have some real good, very good quality okra for the fall by doing this step as well.
Okay, the next question comes from Ling from San Antonio. Is it okay to put the seeds or transplanting plant direct in the purchased composite, Or should I mix well with soil before put the seeds and transplanting plants?
Okay. So certain plants should be direct seeded in your vegetable garden. So October, when it starts cooling down, we start doing all your root crops typically. October through February, you can do multiple planting. So all your root crops are direct seeded, either in large enough size containers that you're going to grow on the patio, or direct into your well prepared vegetable garden. So all root crops are direct seeded. Your leafy greens can be both, both seed as well as transplants. But you always want to make sure when you plant either seed or transplants in a container or in your vegetable garden that we follow the keys that the area is clean of weeds. You've incorporated landscape or garden mix or liberal amounts of finished high grade compost, typically a manure-based compost, into the native soil. And you do this, as we mentioned before in the other question, every major spring and fall planting. Okay. So you don't directly seed it in there. You got to work it in there. Now, compost is a soil amendment, folks. It is not a fertilizer. The nutrient content of compost is very, very low. So it's very, very essential that we work in pre-plant granulated fertilizer into your traditional garden beds or your raised beds or your containers. And all that is more in-depth information with a previous recording of how to get your fall garden ready for planting at the My Extension 210 YouTube channel. And we'll show a slide towards the end as well.
Okay, thank you. Denise Bettis put the link to our My Extension YouTube channel in the chat. If you guys are interested, click on the link to check out our YouTube channel, My Extension 210. Our next question comes from David from San Antonio. He says, Mr. Rodriguez, I emailed you this question and then saw this meeting. So he wanted to ask you again here. Our schools students' garden looks like they will be down for the fall garden and possibly into the spring. We are looking at using cover crops to help keep down weeds and also to provide nutrients. Any suggestions on type of cover crops and any other thoughts on our school gardens that will be lying bare for some time due to COVID restrictions?
Okay, so we need to get the kids back to school, and gardening is good for everyone. So the best cover crop consideration for this time of the year with the heat is southern peas. Black eyed peas, purple hull peas, purple pink eyed peas, anything like that, that really builds the soil. And it's a good edible crop. If you've never grown cowpeas, southern peas, you can harvest the very, very young pods and use them as you would do a green bean. And then they're very versatile. Once those pods size up and color up, you can shell those fresh beans, and oh man, they cook up so great. That's a southern tradition. Or you can wait and let them dry on the plant, or let some of them dry on the plant and then shell those peas later. So it's an excellent green manure crop. It's an edible crop, an excellent cover crop. Towards the end of the season, you mow them down and you work them into the soil is the key. You work them into the soil because all that good stuff on the top, besides that root system down underneath, is that organic material that you're working in. So that would be your compost. And if you really need to add extra compost, work that in as well with your pre-plant fertilizer. And then October, you would do this in October, early October. Late October, then you would transition to either a winter vetch or a cereal rye, such as Elbon rye. And David, since you're here in San Antonio, you can probably contact Dean with Douglas King seed. He should have those when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Mary C. She's asking, what is the white powdery substance on her hibiscus plants?
White powdery substance on hibiscus plant. Okay. If it looks like flour, that's overall the leaf. That's probably powdery mildew, which is a fungus, and we see that on vegetables like squash, zucchini, pumpkins. Typically, we see that on crepe myrtles. And if that's a fungus, then we have to ask why it's there, and that's typically caused by lack of sun or not enough sunlight, poor air circulation, overwatering, getting the leaves too wet. Okay. And then you can treat with a general fungicide that you can purchase from your Texas certified nursery professional at your independent nursery. If it looks more cottony in appearance, it's an insect either on the leaves or on the stems. Like it could be a mealybug or an insect like that, or a soft type scale. Again, and that's caused the same way as the mildew issue of how we're maintaining this plant. So a mild insecticide such as spinosad, or ideally spinosad with insecticidal soap, will work. And all these products, you always read and follow label instructions.
Okay. The next question comes from Larry. He had asked about his baby Bubba Okra, and there was a follow-up question to that. He says, by fresh, do you mean fresh mixed, or are you implying that it has a short shelf life?
I presume he's talking about the compost, or what is he
That,
talking? I'm not
his
sure.
first question was about the baby Bubba. The leaves were falling off and there was a slimy attachment to the stem. And
Okay,
the
the
follow-up question.
the slimy attachment is either insects doing feeding, or kind of similar to the okra pod. The plant is wounded or it's bleeding, or some residue from that wound is coming out.
Okay, did that answer your question, Larry? If not, please ask it again in the chat and we can get back to it, okay? The next question comes from Chris from Houston. He says he made a huglekultur mounds in his backyard with chopped branches and clippings and covered with homemade compost. Plants initially did well, then began to die or were covered with aphids even after watering every other day for a week. Can you discuss that, David, why that might be happening?
Yeah, I'm not sold on this Hugo culture thing. But if you want to try it, fine. I think the challenge with this Hugo culture, particularly if you're trying to grow vegetables, is um, if you use coarse material, which the concept of this Hugo culture is, and you're trying to grow vegetables, if you're not, and then remember, compost is not particularly high grade finished manure based compost is not fertilizer. It's organic material. It's a soil amendment with very low nutritional content. And then when you're adding this coarse material, particularly this hugelkultur concept, and you're growing vegetables, you're running a race here. And you have to have ample nutrition from start to end, predominantly with these modern day selections of vegetables that we have in production for the home gardener and commercial use. So you need to really triple the amount of normal fertilizer that you would probably have, because these plants are probably starving. And when a plant is stressed, then insects and disease pressure typically comes about. Aphids is because it's usually this issue and or not enough sunlight, overwatering, lack of air circulation in and around your plants, meaning that this lack of sunlight. We're planting too many plants in there. So a lot of those have to do with factors in there.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Linda. What fertilizer on the what fertilizer should she put on her fall okra? She has 79 plants cranking out now.
Okay, so we're in and around Central and South Texas for 40 years, both for the spring and fall vegetable garden that we use as a pre-plant. We work in 3 to 5 pounds of a premium 1959 slow release fertilizer, and that's what you would need. That's enough juice to get the race going and finish the race, and that would be very fine. That's the same fertilizer we use both for spring and fall planting. We use that here also in early March for all your other plants and mid-April for your lawn as well.
Okay, the next question comes from Nofifa. What do I use to get rid of lizards in my garden?
Next question, please. I mean, we don't want to get rid of lizards. Lizards are good guys. You know, they're out there eating the bad guys, and they're beautiful, especially the anoles and lizards like that. So have a conversation with them, and if they scare you or they bother you, tell them to move on somewhere else. But they are good guys, and we don't want to get rid of them.
Okay, thank you, David. The next question comes from Cindy from San Antonio. I have a Sungold tomato plant in a whiskey barrel planted in the spring. Do I cut it back or continue growing for the fall or replant another plant?
I think Sungold is a small fruited tomato. So normally on small fruited tomatoes, our most of our spring crop is finished locally the month of July. So we by 4th of July we're finished for the spring planting. So what we do is if you're dedicated for your tomatoes, indeterminate varieties or small fruited ones, eggplant peppers, and they look good and they get through July and August. They don't have insects, diseases, or 25 pounds of spider mites on them. And if they did, those would need to have been pulled out a long time ago. If they still look nice and healthy, you've been maintaining them in the next week or so, or this weekend, as we talked about fall okra, cut those centers out a little bit, no more than a third. Fertilize them big time, mulch them, replenish that organic mulch. And that should, remember, pruning is a dwarfing and rejuvenation process. This will help them flush out going into the fall and produce more flowers when it cools down and fruits set. But we have a lot of work in science and research. If you put a new transplant out in a similar sized whiskey barrel, you keep it well watered and well fertilized, new transplants will always outproduce the old carryovers from the spring. So you make the decision.
Okay, so the next question is the clarification from Linda and Larry. Thank you so much. Um, when he mentioned fresh in the question earlier, he was referring to another question about the Zucchini Vine Borer that you mentioned to spray with BT, and he's wondering if you can clarify what the word fresh BT, fresh mix or not old BT container.
Now I understand. That helps. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so Bacillus thuringiensis BT liquid and most products that are organic base and a living type of an organism is you got to make sure that you purchase enough to be used within a season or two. if you don't seal it correctly and store it correctly with the temperatures, that living organism is not going to be effective. So that's what I mean by fresh. So if you've had it for more than a year or so, it's not really going to be that effective. That's
Oh,
what fresh means.
okay. The next question comes from Ling. She asks, what is a good ratio for mixing clay soil with compost for the vegetable garden?
Well, if you have a vegetable garden and it's predominantly clay soil, which a lot of us have on the 35 corridor of Central and South Texas, right, and a lot of part of the state as well, get 2 inches, minimum of 2 inches of a high grade finished manure-based compost, and work that in a minimum of 6 inches to the soil, into the soil, with your pre-plant granulated fertilizer.
Okay, and the next question comes from Brian from San Antonio. Is the Living Mulch at Rainbow Gardens, is that a blend of compost and shredded mulch? Is it good for vegetables and flower beds?
Yeah, my favorite mulch in and around the San Antonio area, and a good part of the state, of course, is a double shredded hardwood mulch with compost. They blend compost in with this mix, but it's finely shredded. And that is a very high grade mulch for everything as a top dressing. Plants on your patio, in containers, trees, shrubs, everything. And we like to replenish our mulch typically twice a year, about May and again coming in early September, coming out of the heat of August. Because remember, organic materials do break down with time.
Okay, the next question is from Linda. She wanted to go back to the okra question earlier, that you mentioned cutting out the heart or the middle third. Can you please explain that, David?
Yeah, so if the plant is 6 feet tall, you remove about 30% of it, which will be about what, 2 feet. You get sharp pruners or loppers, go from the very top, go typically down the center because typically it grows like a bush, might have apical dominance down the center. You go all the way down at a node attachment or a stem attachment, and you gut it. You just trim it out.
Okay, the next question's from Cindy. When she had asked about her Sungold tomatoes, she said, "Thank you for the response. That she might plant a new transplant in another container next to the older plant to compare. How would she know which stems to cut out of the older plant? Also, do I cut back the long vines on the remaining stems?"
Whatever's dead or ugly for sure needs to be removed. The rest, just bring it down 20% to a third. But remember, wherever you bring it down, underneath that, which remains, you have to have leaf mass. So a third is a guideline. You know, if you don't have that much leaf mass, if you potentially bring it down by a third uniformly, then you might have to raise it up to about 20%. So you just, every plant's a little bit different. One third's a guideline, but you have to have leaf mass underneath what remains.
Okay, the next question's from Nadia. Where do you get that double mulch you mentioned?
Double shredded hardwood mulch with compost, which often is referred to as a living mulch. Most all independent nurseries and garden centers do sell it.
Okay, next question from Mary C. She says that she bought a Mexican white oak. It's about 6 feet high. Uh, she sees she sees that leaves are being eaten. Also, leaves are getting thin. Should I put something on the tree? I don't want to hurt it with substances uh, in this San Antonio heat.
Okay, so July and August is very rough on new plantings of trees because it's so hot. So a couple considerations is we always practice IPM, integrated pest management. So you need to really scout that tree and look at what is actually doing the damage. You know, it could be a type of beetle, it could be a caterpillar, it could be grasshoppers or other. So we don't want to randomly spray because we have to visually have that insect in order to spray to get it under control. That's one thing. So scout it out. And if a tree is under stress, then it's typically other considerations. A lot of trees are stressed because we're pruning too much on it. These young trees need to be left alone to grow leaves and a mass quantity of leaves. So we refer to that as a trashy trunk techniques. The more leaves, the more photosynthesis, the more energy and growth of the tree will become. So after 2 or 3 years during the month of January, when the tree is dormant, then you can start pruning it accordingly. What you need to do, and always with oak species, we always immediately seal each individual cut with pruning paint to minimize oak wilt potential as well. The other big issue with trees is when we go to the garden center nursery, we always look for that big tree, the big one. You know, we purchase a tree that has a huge canopy in a very, very small root system. So we need to purchase trees that are in balance like it's scale. Good top canopy, healthy leaves, and a well balanced root system. Often we're not looking at those roots. We're not loosening up those roots. We're not cutting an X on both sides of that root ball to rejuvenate that root system. So we need to look at this as well. And we plant trees too deep as well. So make sure it's not planted too deep, that it does not have any excess soil or mulch up on that crown of that tree. And, slow it down when we buy these trees and don't put it on the back of the pickup truck running down the highway, Hurricane 74 mile per hour wind, and whipping that tree around. So if an insect or disease is on a young tree, often it's one of these issues. And if we need to identify the insect first and then spray with the appropriate insecticide, and we always read and follow label instructions.
Okay, well, that looked like the, oh wait, do we have, okay, we have one more question in the chat. Let's see. Or a few more. Okay, good. Yeah, just keep the questions coming, guys. So the next question comes from Linda. She says, I've had my best pepper production from late August through early December in Houston. After I cut the summer plants back to around 18 inches at the end of July, what fertilizer should she use or do you recommend for peppers?
Plants typically consist of a 3-1-2 analysis. 3 parts nitrogen, 1 part phosphorus, and 2 parts potassium. So we have gone with a close to a 4-1-2 analysis, such as a 1959 premium. Fertilizer would be fine, or something like a 2510, an 18612, or a 15510, whatever you can find. Often they're under the brand name as a lawn fertilizer, but you can still use it for your spring or fall vegetable garden. We prefer the 1959 since it's a slow release fertilizer, and then we can use it on our lawns in mid-April here locally, and spring and fall vegetable garden, as well as tree shrubs and other. So one product does many things. So if you can use that, that would be fine.
Okay, the next question comes from Corey. If this pertains to this webcon, I have a desert willow that is 2 years old. The leaves are getting brown spots and one whole branch has lost its leaves. What could this be? Over or underwatering, fungus, or a bug?
Possibly, yes. Any of those. Normally, so you need to look at what you're doing and how you're doing it. We've mentioned that often plants are planted too deep in the ground, so we need to look at that. We need to make sure there's no excess soil or mulch up on that crown. On all tree species, we want to see that main trunk, not a telephone pole in the ground. We want to see that main trunk and the flare roots coming off of it. We do not want plant competition, particularly on new plantings. We don't want any grass, weeds, or plant competition. Ideally, 10 feet away from that main trunk should be mulched, and that organic mulch replenished twice a year. And then when we water, we lay down a good amount of watering. Yes, desert willows are considered drought tolerant, but young plants have to be weaned off and get established before we can say that word drought tolerant. So when we water, particularly July and August, and watering is the hardest thing to teach people. Water every 3 days, but lay down water uniformly around that root zone, a thorough deep soaking. Early in the morning, water down the leaves, water down the trunk of the tree, and then check it underneath that mulch there 3, 4, 5 days down the line and see how the moisture content is. If it's real dry, kick it up a little bit more on the next watering, and adjust accordingly. And of course, when we get into the fall and winter and next spring, remember it's not July and August, so we don't water as much as we were during that time frame. And don't hesitate. You all should know a good Texas certified nursery professional at your local independent nursery. Get to know them by name and take a sample in, and maybe they can help you if the symptom keeps spreading after we've looked at what we just talked about.
Okay, the next question comes from Kathleen Weatherford. I have 4 peach trees to move. They grew through the bottom of the pots. Any suggestions on when to do this? The roots are over 1 to 2 inches in diameter.
If you do that now with these trees that have rooted into the ground, you'll kill them. So wait till January when they're completely dormant. Cut the container off the tree and try to dig as much as that root system as possible. And basically, you're going to bare root this tree, remove the excess soil off the tree, and then trim it back to 3 feet, and then follow the guidelines on the Aggie Horticulture website under fruit trees on how to grow a tree bare root and how to plant them, because everybody wants to grow peaches. Unfortunately, people don't grow peaches correctly. It's the hardest input tree of all the fruit trees, and it's a challenge. You got to spray them, you got to prune them, you got to train them, you got to follow a lot of guidelines in order to have good success. But wait till January, bare root them, and cut them back hard at that time.
Okay, Ling asks, does New Earth premium manure-based compost have enough fertilizer?
Yes, we mentioned 3 times with our chat today that compost is not a fertilizer, okay? It's a soil amendment. It does not have enough nutrition in it, particularly if you're running the race of growing spring or fall vegetables. So that's why it's so crucial to use a pre-plant granulated fertilizer, such as the 1959, or a good organic granulated fertilizer that's poultry-based or poultry-based or alfalfa-based, but you have to use 12 to 20 pounds per 100 square feet if you go that route.
Okay, the next question is from Mary. Someone uh, gave me a Madagascar plum. In research, I found out it will get 18 to 20 feet tall. Is this correct?
I'm not familiar with a Madagascar. Uh, I should say plum or palm.
I'm sorry, I misread that. Madagascar palm.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I've never heard of a Madagascar plum, but because all plums originate from China. Madagascar palm is a pretty cool looking plant. Has big thorns on it, so it'll bite you if you're not careful off that main stem, the trunk. And then they have leaves that are oleander and looks like an oleander leaf. No, they're not going to get that big here. We grow them on as an interior plant or a patio plant. They're going to be very, very cold sensitive here. They're You grow them as a succulent, like a cactus, so you don't overwater them. If you get them to grow 3 feet, maybe 4 feet tall in 20 years, you've done well.
Okay, the next question is from Cindy. She asks about Blue Salvia. Should I cut it back by 1/3 now? It is looking very shabby. She's thinking that she should treat it like a Salvia gregae, where when she cuts it back by 1/3.
Yeah, so there are many types of salvias, and being a perennial and all the other perennials. So, as a rule of thumb, we usually cut most perennials back early March. That could be 1/3 to 1/2 to the greenwood or possibly to the ground, depending on the species of perennial or salvia. And then we look at these perennial type plants throughout the year. When they're about 80% bloomed out, spent flowers, we get sharp pruners or head shears. We cut them back about 1/3. Remember, pruning is a dwarfing and rejuvenation process. We do that during the month of August, no later than early September. We, we fertilize, we replenish the organic mulch. And the reason we don't do that no later than early September is if we start pruning these perennial plants back too late in the fall, you encourage a lot of new growth late in the season. And if we have an early hard freeze, you risk burning that new growth down and potentially killing that plant.
Okay, the next question is from David. He asks, will the children's garden at the Botanical Gardens be running this year?
You tell me. Who knows? I would hope so. And we might start out in October, later possibly. We don't know. Ruby and I are cannot do any face-to-face contact, as well as our Bear County Master Gardener Extension volunteers, and you have to have time to prepare and plan. So I don't know. Let's just see what happens. We're all learning new things, and it's been tough. So check back at the Bear County Extension website or the San Antonio Botanical Garden website, maybe in late August, early September, and see where we're at.
Okay, the next question comes from Kathleen. She says, my peach trees I asked about are about 4 years old, and she wants, she had that question about her peach trees in the container, and she was getting ready to put them in the ground this year. So is your advice still the same, David, about waiting in January?
Yeah, it's the same because if those roots are going or have outgrown that container and the tree, and this is any plant that are growing into the ground, those roots are we don't know how deep they are. If you dig them at this time, you're going to kill that tree. So you got to wait till these plants are dormant in January, where you have a little bit better opportunity, and you're going to have to dig with a pitchfork and bare root these plants and follow the guidelines that we mentioned.
Okay, the next question is from Brian in San Antonio. How do you know when it's time to dig up your sweet potatoes? We planted the slips in the middle of May.
Yeah, sweet potatoes normally finish around October, right when we do that transition of hot summer heat, and then September, day and night temperatures start cooling down some, the days become shorter. So October is about the time that you pull and dig these roots. Remember, starch converts to sugar. So the ones that are bruised or wounded, you would want to use immediately. The other ones that look good after you clean them off and really dry them real good and store them for 30 days and let them cure some more to get more sugar intensity into that root. Then you can bring me, Brian, a sweet potato pie for Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas.
Okay, it looks like we're getting close on time, everyone. If we don't get to your question today, uh, always know that you can email David Rodriguez and he can answer your questions later on today. Um, do we have time for one more question, David?
Yeah, let's do one more question and then we'll go ahead and finish with the rest of the slides we have, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Donna from Houston is asking, why are her cucumber plants turning yellow?
Okay, so we really need more information. Are these new plants or these old plants? I would presume these are old plants. You know, if I was out in the July, August heat and I was planted in the spring, you know what's wrong. It's too hot. They're tired. They're finished. So the biggest problem we have as vegetable gardeners is, you know, July and August is very hard to grow a lot of things. You know, maybe okra's good, hot peppers, eggplants, sweet potatoes is fine. But cucumbers are a very small window. You know, we do cucumbers from about April to late May, and then we start them again in late August, early September for the fall. They're just tired, and we don't want to leave a lot of trash in our gardens because if we get too many insects, disease, and spider mites, all we're doing is bringing more long-term problems. We need to get this inoculant out ASAP. And remember, spider mites do not compost well. Dispose of it in a black garbage bag, but they're just tired. You know, pull them out and let's plant fresh ones, uh, uh, healthy transplants at the second, third leaf stage, well rooted, or direct seed here in at the end of August, early September.
Okay, thank you everyone for your questions today. And if you check in the chat, Denise Bettis has put David's email address in there. And so again, if we didn't get to your question today, you can email David at his email address there. And okay, David, do you want me to move the slide forward?
Please. Our bonus plant for today is fall marigolds, Mary Mums. I always like to have a bonus plant with all my talks. So the month of August, no later than the first week of September, is when you want to put transplants out of fall marigolds. And we're looking for large blooming marigolds, not the little blooming ones, the big blooms. And we refer to those as Mary Mums. So we came out with this name, a marigold that has a mum-like flower. And really, if you've never grown fall marigolds, really the fall time is the best time. So if it's hot, you really have to watch the fertilizer, make sure it's well weeded. Never plant on dry soil, never set out transplants. They come in the orange, yellow, or the gold colors, and start sourcing your plants. And then if you find some plants here pretty soon for fall planting, make sure that you pinch off the blooms, okay? Because you're putting a little bit too much stress with the August heat. Pinch the blooms off. They'll bloom later. Keep them well watered, well mulched, and well fertilized. And next slide, please. And you'll enjoy some of the prettiest blooms for the October, November up to the first frost season. That's a slide from the Children's Vegetable Garden program that we oversee at the San Antonio Botanical Garden. And remember, el Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, is the orange marigold, is the traditional flower of Latin America. Next slide, please. So we've talked about these websites. Please use them. A lot of great information there. If you're not using them, then do start using them because they have so much great information to them as well. Next slide. That's our Bexar County Extension Service website there. So, or you can just do Bexar County Extension Service. So keep an eye on what we're doing on that home page of other webinars that we're offering in the future. And a lot of these webinars that we've been doing, not only myself for gardening, but Molly Keck, our entomologist, she'll be doing other ones that you can find on the Bexar County Extension Service website as well. But we have them archived. Give us a week or less to put them together, and we have them on our My Extension 210, capital M, capital E. My Extension 210 is one word, YouTube channel. And subscribe to it, please. Subscribe to them as well. And we have all these. And a lot of the subject matter that was asked today, folks, some of y'all need to review. And we have webinars of a lot of the subject matter that y'all asked today as well. Next slide, please. And Saturday, listen to us live. Bill Rohde, my radio mentor. Bill's been doing radio for 50 plus years. We do the 1200 WOAI Lawn and Garden Show every Saturday, 7 to 9 a.m. And if you go to the WOAI 1200, we have podcasts of all radio programs that we've done in the past. And we're going on 15 years that we've done this. So if you didn't get your question answered today, send me an email, next slide, or call us at the radio show this Saturday. That's my email address. If you send me images, folks, make sure they're high quality. Send them as part of the attachment, not as part of the email. Hopefully everyone got their questions answered today, or we will if you send me an email sometime this week when we can get to it. And I hope y'all learned a little bit and listened to other people's questions as well. And we always want to learn together. Remember, learn and have fun. Thank y'all for joining us today. And thank you for supporting all the great extension programs that we offer at the Bexar County Extension Service website. And have fun, get the kids involved in the gardening experience as well. Thank you for joining us today.